Imagine being so powerful that kings needed your approval before going to war. Imagine having more influence than governments, more connections than emperors, and more money than entire nations. For much of the 19th century, one family came astonishingly close to that reality. Their name became synonymous with wealth, influence, and power. The Rothschilds. To some, they were brilliant financiers who helped build the modern financial world. To others, they were mysterious figures operating behind the scenes of history. But regardless of opinion, one fact is undeniable. Few families have ever accumulated influence on the scale that the Rothschilds achieved. And yet, the empire they built would eventually face challenges no fortune could fully control. The story begins in the crowded streets of Frankfurt, Germany, during the 18th century. At the time, Europe was a continent of monarchies, wars, and constant political uncertainty. Opportunities were limited. Most people lived and died in the same social class. Picture this. Frankfurt, Germany, 1744. A narrow, overcrowded street called the Judengasse, the Jews' Lane. It is a walled ghetto where Jewish families are confined by law, forbidden from owning land, forbidden from most trades, forbidden from even walking on certain streets on Sundays. Into this world, a boy named Mayor Amschel Rothschild is born. Born and raised in the Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt, Mayer faced significant restrictions due to the anti-Jewish laws of the time. He was supposed to become a rabbi, but fate had other plans. His parents died young, and young Mayer pivoted hard. He apprenticed at a banking firm in Hanover, learning the mechanics of foreign trade and currency exchange. Then he came back to the ghetto with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. He started as a dealer in rare coins, quickly attracting the patronage of influential figures, most notably Prince William of Hesse. Here's the genius move. Prince William was one of the wealthiest men in Europe, a man who literally rented out his own soldiers to foreign armies. Managing a royal's money gave Mayer legitimacy, access, and, most critically, trust. And in banking, trust is everything. By the 1760s, Mayor Amschel Rothschild had established his banking business and was operating as a court factor to the German Landgraves of Hesse-Kassel. A Jewish man from a ghetto street was now handling the finances of European royalty. But Mayor Amschel was thinking bigger. Much, much bigger. Mayer had 10 children. 5 of them were sons. And he gave each one a mission that would change the world. He expanded the family empire across Europe under his 5 sons. Amschel Mayer in Frankfurt, Salomon in Vienna, Nathan in London, Karl in Naples, and James in Paris. Think about what this meant. In an era with no internet, no telephones, no telegraph or radio, when information traveled only as fast as a horse, information was power. The Rothschilds had family members sitting at the heart of every major financial capital in Europe. While governments often struggled to communicate across borders, the Rothschild network could move information and capital with remarkable speed. The Rothschilds had built one of the most effective information networks on the continent. They wrote to each other constantly in coded letters. They shared intelligence. They coordinated bond trades across 5 countries simultaneously. Endogamy within the family was an essential part of the Rothschild strategy, ensuring that control of their wealth remained in family hands. They even married cousins to keep the empire tight. Through their collaborative efforts, the Rothschilds rose to prominence in loans, government bonds, and trading in bullion. They weren't just bankers. They were the world's first multinational financial network. And no government, no rival bank, could match the speed of a family that trusted each other with everything. Now we get to the most legendary moment in Rothschild history. June 1815. The fate of Europe hangs on a single battle in Belgium, Waterloo. In June 1815, Europe waited to know the result of the Battle of Waterloo. If Napoleon won, French bonds would soar and British markets would collapse. If he lost, Britain's financial credibility would be secure for decades. Nathan Rothschild, running the London branch, had spent years building something extraordinary. He had built a private intelligence network that outpaced European governments, couriers using coded messages and carrier pigeons to relay information across Europe faster than any state system. And on that fateful day, Nathan Rothschild cleaned up on the gilt market thanks to his rapid, reliable, and finely honed communication system that brought him news of Wellington's victory ahead of anyone else in Westminster and the city. What did he do with that information? According to legend, he walked into the London Stock Exchange and did something nobody expected. He started selling British government bonds, heavily. The primary trading instrument on the exchange was British consols, bonds that provide coupon payments in perpetuity. Once the victory was known, they would rise in price. But rather than buying, Nathan started to sell. As the price dropped, he sold even more. The market panicked. If Rothschild, the man who knew everything, was selling, then Britain must have lost. Prices crashed. Investors stampeded for the exits. And then, quietly, through intermediaries, Rothschild's own agents were discreetly buying up every British consul they could acquire at rock-bottom prices. When the official news of Wellington's victory arrived, the bonds soared. The collective assets of the 5 Rothschild brothers in spring 1815 came to £500,000. By July 1816, it was £1 million. In a single year, the greatest information trade in history. Now, historians will tell you that some of the more spectacular versions of this story are embellished. Although it is virtually part of English history that Nathan made millions out of his early information about Waterloo, the evidence for the exact figure is slender. But what is beyond dispute is this. After Waterloo, the Rothschilds were no longer just rich bankers. They were the financial power of Europe. The decades that followed saw the Rothschilds everywhere history was being made. Nathan smuggled gold through Napoleon's continental blockade, funded the Duke of Wellington's Peninsular and Waterloo campaigns, propped up the Bank of England during the liquidity crisis of 1834, and created a new European state bond market based on easily tradable notes. His brothers on the continent were equally busy. Nathan's brothers worked with the governments of France, Austria, and Belgium to finance the reconstruction of Europe, devastated by 2 decades of war. Beginning in the 1840s, they established much of the continental railway network. Railways, diamonds, oil, mining. If it powered 19th-century industrial civilization, chances are a Rothschild was behind it. And then came the moment that perhaps best illustrates their power over governments. November 25, 1875. British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli gets urgent intelligence. The Khedive of Egypt was on the verge of selling his 44% stake in the Suez Canal Company to a French consortium. Disraeli recognized the strategic imperative of British control over this vital shipping route to India, but Parliament was not in session and could not authorize the purchase. Disraeli had hours. No Parliament. No time. He called one man. In 1875, the London banking house of N.M. Rothschild and Sons advanced the Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, acting for the British government, £4 million to purchase Suez Canal shares. According to legend, this was transacted on a gentleman's agreement with no documentation, a technically unsecured loan for a sum of several £billion in today's terms. Think about that. The British government came to them. No paperwork. Just a handshake between the most powerful banker in the world and the Prime Minister of the British Empire. Britain got the Suez Canal. The Rothschilds got repaid within 5 months, and got something even more valuable, the confirmation for all of Europe to see that they were indispensable. The Rothschild Bank also funded Cecil Rhodes in the development of the British South Africa Company, and in 1887, the French and English Rothschild banking houses loaned money to and invested in the De Beers diamond mines in South Africa, becoming its largest shareholders. So what do we make of the Rothschilds? They are the most mythologized family in modern history, and also the most misunderstood. Over the centuries, their name has been attached to wild conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic propaganda, and invented legends. The Nazi regime weaponized their image. Governments across history have tried to scapegoat them. But strip away the myths, and what remains is actually more remarkable than the legends. The Rothschild family has managed their dynasty for over 250 years, among the few families worldwide to maintain significant wealth and influence across centuries. They started in a walled ghetto where Jewish people weren't even allowed to walk on certain streets. Within 3 generations, they were lending money to emperors, buying canals on behalf of prime ministers, and bankrolling the Industrial Revolution across an entire continent. 1870s, they loaned money to the French government to pay war indemnities, and made a large loan to the British government that enabled that country to become a major shareholder in the Suez Canal Company. Yet history has a way of changing the rules. The late 19th and early 20th centuries brought new challenges. Industrialization accelerated. New corporations emerged. National banking systems expanded. Competition increased. The financial world that the Rothschilds had helped shape was becoming larger and more complex. Then came the disasters of the 20th century. World War I shattered old political systems. Empires collapsed. Economic instability spread across Europe. The world that had allowed the family to flourish was changing rapidly. Yet even greater challenges were still ahead. The rise of extremist political movements across Europe created enormous danger. In Nazi Germany, anti-Jewish persecution intensified. The Rothschild name became a target of propaganda and hatred. Family members faced threats, displacement, and confiscation of assets. Institutions built over generations came under pressure. The continent they had helped finance was descending into catastrophe. World War II transformed Europe once again. Borders shifted. Governments fell. Entire economies were rebuilt. The age in which a single banking family could dominate international finance was fading. After the war, global finance became increasingly decentralized. Large corporations, central banks, multinational institutions, and new financial systems reduced the dominance of traditional family banking dynasties. The Rothschilds remained wealthy. They remained influential. But the era in which they stood above nearly every competitor had come to an end. The family that once financed kings now operated in a world where power was distributed across vast networks of institutions. Their story had changed from dominance to adaptation. Remained enormous. The railways they financed transformed transportation. The infrastructure they supported accelerated industrial growth. The financial innovations they helped develop influenced modern banking. Few families left a larger mark on the economic history of Europe. And perhaps that is the greatest twist of all. The family that appeared powerful enough to shape a continent eventually discovered the same reality that confronts every empire, corporation, and dynasty. No matter how great the fortune, no matter how vast the influence, no matter how powerful the network, history never stands still. The Rothschilds built one of the most remarkable financial empires the world has ever seen. But even the family that seemed to own a continent could not stop the forces of change. And in the end, it was not a rival family, a military invasion, or a financial collapse that reduced their dominance. It was time itself, the one force wealth can never buy. Today, the enterprise operates under the Rothschild and Company umbrella, with the French and British branches of the family retaining control. Still there, still powerful, still relevant over 250 years after a coin dealer from a Frankfurt ghetto decided he was going to build something that would outlast empires. Mayor Amschel Rothschild's dying words, reportedly, were simple instructions to his sons. Stay united. Stay loyal. Stay together. They did. And that, more than any single trade or loan, is why the world still says their name. This is Hobate Tales, where we bring history's greatest stories to life. Like and subscribe and drop in the comments. Which dynasty should we cover next?